All right. I wanted to get to this as quickly as possible so some of you that were sort of left hanging on this last slide can work your way through the rest of this. I think the work of Dr. Gray is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to just jump right in. I don't know whether to say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night when you're going to be watching this, but I hope you find it informative and very helpful. So let's move forward. All right. So optimality, funny word, I probably wouldn't ever use that word, but as adaptability. So this idea of optimizing thing, that really what we want are our players to be adaptable, to constantly be able to deal with things that are different. Remember the quote from Ronaldo that every shot is different. They're not the same. You don't get a perfect groove and then just do it. So an optimal movement solution is one that optimally satisfies the current constraints imposed on an individual performer. And remember, some of those constraints were intrinsic to the person and to the situation, and some were extrinsic, the opponent, the lighting conditions, etc. So, dexterity is not confined within the movements of actions themselves, but is revealed in how these movements behave in their interaction with the environment, with unexpectedness and surprises. So we can think of dexterity as not just, say, having good hands or being gentle when the situation calls for it and powerful when the situation calls for it, but it means all of these things to appropriately respond to the demands of the environment. And whether they're expected or unexpected, and so that we're not surprised. So one of the things that he did was, I thought was really fantastic. They used a force plate. I want you to think of this as a relatively large plate that they had the batters stand on, and they were looking at different variables. Now, if you look along the x-axis here, it was the landing. Now, I can't really demonstrate this here. I don't see how far I am, and now my whole head is cut off from the picture. I'm just going to slide this a little bit here so I can see at least what I'm trying to show you. And I see that I can't, but if I were in a batting stance, as the person comes forward, they pick up the forward leg and they put it down, and then they come through with the swing. So what this is looking at is, first of all, with two different types of pitches. A fast ball, and I'm going to put the laser pointer thing on here. So fast ball and a changeup. A changeup is a much slower speed. And there's two variables. One is the timing of when you pick that foot up and it lands versus the swing time in terms of bringing this through either faster or slower. So, and the point here is that as the person recognizes the pitch, they're able to, on this force plate, measure this exact time of the pickup of the front foot, it dropping down, while they're also measuring visually the when the bat comes through. So, so each dot shows one swing, and this was they did this with the VR players, and they did it with the non-VR players, those who practiced in the virtual reality setup and those who didn't. And I'm just reading from the actual article here. I need to change this. There we go. And he said, there's three things he wants us to take from this. First, batters are clearly not doing the same thing every time. and I hope you get that sense. Modifications just in the foot time, the swing time, and what they do as they come through. The timing of the landing of the lead foot on the ground is varying substantially from swing to swing. Second, there are clear motor synergies, meaning there's a trade-off here, and that's what gives us this cluster around the fastball and this cluster around the changeup that whatever you do in one place is not countered, but coordinated with what you do in the other, so that over a range of getting the foot to go fast or slow, or the swing to go faster or slower, things are balanced so that you get this wonderful performance. You only get this tight grouping around these lines in this space if the person is performing well. If you take just somebody and say, okay, try to hit these pitches, and they're not good at it, they'll be all over the place in this. But these are top-level performers and what they're doing. So it says when the batter lands a little bit earlier than normal, they wait a little bit longer to start their swing. When they land a little bit later, they start it earlier. And these 2 degrees of freedom in movement are working together. They compensate for each other. And the basic idea is to stabilize the outcome, getting the bat to the right place at the right time. Finally, he says, if we compare the top and bottom panels in this figure, I have a second figure we'll get to, you'll see that these synergies get tighter and stronger. So, and actually, this is the second one here. I only showed you the better one. This was after training. Which I didn't put in this presentation, is before training. When you get the book or look online, you'll see it's messier. A lot of the dots are away from this diagonal line. Okay, so this variability in hitting an 85-mile-an-hour pitch. Good variability lies in this pink space. Bad variability comes away from this. So these are pitch speed 35 meters per second or 85 miles an hour. The time constraint is all this has to occur within 479 milliseconds. So variability is not noise to be removed, but rather it's an essential part of the skill. So this is part of the point if we think about what's going on in the vision therapy room. We want variability in what happens. I don't want the person doing things exactly the same way over and over and over and over again. Now, the time between the ball being released by the pitcher and the batter shifting weight to the back foot, the time between the back foot waiting and the bat reaching the hitting zone is all on here. Okay? So this is showing on one graph, and I think this is good here, is the pre and post. Pre, you see the kind of mess. A lot of these black dots are far away from the pink optimal zone. We see some of the open ones off too. No one is going to be perfect in these situations. But after training, if this is the kind of thing we get, and I like to think about that with, again, everything we do, particularly in VT. So now we're going to move into some interesting creative movement kinds of things. And boy, this goes back quite a long time. I don't know if many of you remember these co-innovations that occurred, innovations, not innervations, sorry. These co-innovations in doing the high jump that occurred very close in time to each other. One is called the Fosbury Flop, and that's Dick Fosbury up above. And then you have the Brill Bend, and that's the female high jumper. Her last name was Brill. They're only 300 miles apart. They didn't know each other, and they independently developed the same technique. Now, the important thing was that this type of movement over the bar, which is what everybody does now, no one does the old what's called scissors technique, where you lead with one foot, you curl over and bring the back foot. This is the way people do it now. This is what's taught. This is what people learn to do. And I think almost everybody only calls it the Fosbury flop, but it could have been called the Brill bend as well. But the point was, what changed? What constraints changed that allowed this to happen? And it's actually not that these two people had the same aha. It was that the change in constraints made it almost 100% probable that somebody would begin to explore this. So what were they? Let me just see if it's on here. So the main thing was they used to fall into a pit or an area that had wood chips or sand, or no one would want to go head first or back first and fall onto this. But what started here was a great big foam pad was on the other side. The fact that there was a big old foam pad, people were now, it's like, well, I'll try falling on this thing in different ways. And it was the shift to there being a foam pad, the removal of the constraint of needing to protect oneself at the end of the movement, that set the stage for this particular change. So creative solutions are not an idea. That's the point he's trying to make. Creativity does not involve an individual first coming up with an idea in their mind and then sending it down to the motor control department to execute. Acting is not simply an expression of creativity. It is a central part of the creative process. The idea that you would play, experiment, do different things. It's not like, oh, I have this mental picture of the perfect movement and now let me just do it. One has to explore things. So creativity is not an asymmetric process, meaning occurring within the head of the individual, and then you push it out and give it a try. I think this goes for us clinically as well. I remember having discussions with Dr. Steve Kuhl, what a wonderful name, but Dr. Stephen Kuhl, not an optometrist, PhD, but worked very closely with optometry. And his major point was, optometry is a profession driven by clinicians who have insights in the heat of the moment, working with a person, trying to figure out what's going on with them. We are not a profession driven by research or experimentation. That research and experiments always come after the fact, after the thing that the clinician comes up with, and is the kind of thing that fills in the knowledge and understanding of what a creative person acting in the moment, reacting to what's happening, trying different motor actions, and gaining new kinds of insights. What was that thing I saw on the retinoscope? What was that thing I saw the person do through the translucent occluder? Those kinds of things. So, creative solutions arise from a symmetrical, coupled interaction between the individual, the task, and the environmental constraints faced by that performer. Creative solutions emerge when a performer is acting and searching for solutions to satisfy the constraints of a task. And I think of us as our clinicians as doing that all the time. And that's what leads to the development of new insights into human behavior that we as clinicians can find. So, how do we promote creativity? So, here's some sports examples. In cricket, I learned about this from Dr. Gray's book, and I was completely blown away. Sir Don Bradman, obviously from the UK, and he got his K. He averaged in cricket 99.94, might as well be 100 runs per inning. An inning is without making an out. And his number was 50% more than his closest all-time rival who's ever played the sport. He was actually dismissed from his public service, his military service, because of poor eyesight. He had slow reaction time in testing. They said, you're not good enough for military service. What he did was he practiced in his basement with a golf ball. Think of a hard golf ball, hitting it off of a water heater. It's hard to believe the water heater survived much, and he survived. How many bruises might he have had? But with his cricket bat, hitting it off the water heater, bouncing it back, and then hitting it off again. Think of all of the different angles and bounces and other things and pathways that he learned to recognize in a game. A bowler coming in with a spin ball or a fastball or one that just skidded off the ground, he could recognize those differences very early, protect the wicket, and then be more aggressive in his swing because of those thousands of times practiced with the golf ball off a water heater. Would you suggest that to a young budding cricketer? I don't know if that's what they call people who play cricket, but a cricket batsman or batwoman. There you go, batwoman. I like that. Probably not, because if you did and they got hurt, I could imagine lawsuits in this day and age. But that's what he did, and that's what he credits with making him so good at what he did. Now, think of games like soccer, basketball, and ice hockey or field hockey. Play in smaller space, and you have to be more creative. But also play with fewer people. And I've seen this where my daughter, the 1 year we grew up, we lived in Denmark. Instead of playing the full field and maybe getting X number of touches per unit time, they played a short field. They played a cross, and instead of playing 11 on 11, they play 5 on 5. Okay, what he showed, or what research has showed that he's pointing to, is that when you play in these smaller groups 5 on 5, first of all, each person gets more touches per unit of time. What that leads to is them developing more creative moves in a one-on-one situation, or creative passes, learning how to interact better with the other people. Because you're not so fearful of giving up the ball that you'll never get it for the next 20 minutes in a 11 on 11 situation. In a 5 on 5, you'll get far more opportunities to work with the ball and deal with the ball in different kinds of situations. And what you see is, as you go from 5 versus 5, 6, 7 to 11 by 11, 11 versus 11, the decrease in the creativity or creative moves that emerge. So these are things we can play with in sport, but at the same time we can look at in our vision kinds of things. So other kinds of constraint variations in soccer, you can change the playing surface, the shape of the field, even the kind of ball used, so that the person has to basically innovate. So it's a general statement. Coaching methods which encourage self-organization, exploration, and variability are also those that seem to inspire creativity. So you can substitute and say vision therapy methods which encourage self-organization, exploration, and variability are those that will inspire creativity or the development of new visual abilities. So again, I hope you see this parallel all the way through. So we all talk about doing home vision therapy practice and how our patients, home practice, homework, but how do we make it fun? So what he talks about here is simplifying the task, not decomposing it. Decomposition would be more of a reductionist approach to working with some of these things, where you take the pieces and just work on a tiny little piece. So we want kids to learn to coordinate, say, the movement of their feet while keeping their eyes up and deciding which way to go based on information that they pick up from the movement of the person they're interacting with. How do you do this for soccer, but not use lines of cones to dribble around? He hates this, and I can still see kids do this. Set up the cones, move the ball, walk with the ball, go around the cones. It's like, you never have to do that. He said, well, how do we make this fun? Play the game of tag. So have a coach try to tag players while they keep control of the ball. Okay? Have two players control a ball, each of them, within a designed area, or the two of them constantly passing it back and forth, or one to play keep away. So this is the kind of thing that will set the development of the skills, not just dribble a ball around a cone. Okay? And I think of basketball, the lines, shooting, layups. Shoot the layup, get the rebound. Shoot the layup, get the rebound, with no defense or this kind of thing. What about some of these kinds of games? I think he makes so much more sense in terms of how to develop some of these fundamental skills. So the point on this slide, movement and information are coupled, okay? Again, information is potential information that's out there. As we move in relation to what's out there, then we begin to learn how to use that information. So to make the movement easier for a new learner, what we're going to do is scale down the skill while still trying to keep its basic structure. So some constraints might be slow down the speed, shorter working distances, smaller equipment, but retain similarity to what the end product should be. That's a very, very critical kind of thing. So this next slide gets into something very, very interesting. And what he called here was coupled versus decoupled movements. And I'll explain the slide to you. So what they used was eye movement gaze trackers on goalies. And this is what you have above is the picture of where the eye movements were of the players that were asked to do two different things. On the top part, the goalie was asked to say if the ball was going to go to the right or the left, and they watched the movements, the different things, and you could see where the person was looking. And on the bottom one, the goalie was asked not to tell us what they were going to do, but to actually dive to their left or dive to their right, and these were different timings and where they were looking. And I hope you can see very, very clearly that the one asked to make a judgment is looking in a different place and only gets to the ball at the very last moment. Whereas the person who is asked to dive is actually watching the ball and watching the person come in more peripherally to the ball to look at that relationship in the space. Very, very different kind of thing. And it turns out that the ones who would actually dive rather than say do a much better job in this thing. So we go back to some of what we were talking about earlier. When the coach came up to me, the batting coach, and said, I want my players making better decisions. And I said, no, you don't. You want them taking better actions. And you take the action based on being as close to the actual experience, not being in your head talking to yourself and then coming up with a verbal response about what you think you would do. Okay? Very much like if I say, tell me what your instructional set is when you do X test or Y test. And people go, well, I would say, and it's almost invariably different than what you actually say. getting you in your life situation and just doing it, we would then get a sense of what you actually do say. So I hope you get the idea. We need to structure our practice in vision therapy as close to what we want the person to do in real life. And I really don't want them verbal diarrhea, if you will, or word vomit. Watch the movie Mean Girls, you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about. We don't want that. We want the person doing the correct action. And this is such good direct evidence based on eye movements and gaze trackers that if we ask the person to tell us and not actually act. Now, we can get them to dive right or left, and we can talk with them afterwards. What do you think? What maybe happened? Do you have any idea? We could show them and then talk about, yeah, you're watching this, looking at the ball. Here, this one makes a saccade most likely from the face to the ball at about this time. But you're gazing at the ball and noticing the person relative to where the ball is. But you're not watching their feet. Please don't watch their feet. That kind of thing. Or how about trying this or that and looking soft or looking this way? So he has a good idea here when he says, well, what exactly do we mean by fundamental? Okay? And I gave a paper one time at the Kraskin Invitational Skeffington Symposium on Vision, KISS, about no more levels. Let's stop talking about these things develop in these hierarchies, okay? So there's this assumption that we have this linear, deterministic relationship between fundamental movement skills. But this is not consistent with what we actually see in adaptive, complex systems in athletes and with our vision therapy patients. So I've never liked this differentiation with, well, we work on gross motor, then we work on fine motor. No, we grab objects, we hit objects, we touch objects, we guide ourselves through space, and we always use gross and fine motor together. So I think a lot of these differentiations are not only not productive, but are a little silly in ways. They do not help us actually understand the total pattern. And it's been so nice to find somebody from a completely different field that meshes so nicely in my own thinking on this. So here we're going to talk briefly about convergent versus divergent problem solving. And I think it's interesting how he brings this up. This is something I've talked about, Bruce Wolfe has talked about, and many, many others in the field. Is ESO mean we're going to get a convergent thinker? And the answer is no. The goal is everybody, each person, should be able to be convergent in their thinking. Maybe we need to define these very quickly. Convergent thinker, there's a problem to solve. They think for a while, come up with a solution, and they realize that, they put it into action, and they solve the problem. Divergent problem-solving style. Problem presents itself, and they can generate multiple potential different approaches to things. In general, when given a problem at the beginning, you want people to be more divergent so that they don't lock onto a solution and only try that over and over again and continue to fail. You want them to have multiple different ways to go about trying. And try this, try this, try this. Ooh, this looks better. Let's work on this. What variations do I have in this one? So you get divergent within even a convergent pathway to find the absolute best way to do it. So when we assess fundamental movement skills, we're looking for a convergent solution. Can the child solve this movement problem in this specific way? So in essence, we're going to say we don't want to look at these skills this way. But this doesn't fit at all with this new view of skill as involving adaptive, variable, problem solvers. I look at my students who are taught to do simple physiological H movement patterns, and they do it the same way all the time. And if you watch what I do with my ocular motility testing, I'm starting, I'm stopping, I'm changing speeds, I'm talking to the person, I'm looking at how they interact with the moving target through what we're doing. So I'm not looking for very specifics on things. I am moving through developmental scales of things to see where we are. So what we want to see are divergent solutions. How many different ways can you achieve this goal? Think of the Greenwald eye movement procedure, where at first we want somebody just moving their eyes, but then we want them, can you find a way to only move your head so that your eyes don't move in your head at all? Can you do it with 50% head movement and 50% eye movement? So these are different ways to play with it. Is there another way to do this? Is there another way to do that? Do you always need to look with intensity when you come closer? Or can you look soft and come closer? Can you look with intensity and let go? What are the different ways to play with it? So that is the development of a virtuoso in these movement patterns. So now another thing he talks about is donor sports. Not that they're giving something, but that if you work with this sport, this is what you want to become good at, but you work in this one or work in this one, is there a spillover effect? I remember there was a period of time in the National Football League where some of the players were actually enrolled in dance instruction, okay? By learning some of the different kinds of dance moves, and I don't mean line dancing, I mean ballet, okay? By learning some of the different types of things for ballet, would they have better awareness of the body, better balance, and be able to perform better in their sport? So, athletes need to become versatile and adaptive movers before they can become expert athletes. Furthermore, they need to become attuned to affordances. An affordance is something that I notice that I can take advantage of in various sport performance contexts. If it's wet out, maybe I can slide better than if it's dry. I happen to be wearing spikes. That's not going to work when it's dry. My foot hits and I can actually hurt myself doing certain moves. But if it's wet, I pick them up just slightly. I can slide much further, and maybe that allows me to do something that I couldn't have done in that situation. That's potential, what we mean there. So the key to becoming an adaptive mover and this attunement, tuning oneself, is the use of so-called donor sports, which emphasize exploratory practice and guided discovery. So donor sports are ones which share some of the same athletic movements and affordances required for successful performance in their primary target sport. So I think we have some, I have some examples on the side here. So he said, training for the primary sport of soccer, you could use parkour. I don't know what parkour is. Parkour. I said it involves moving from one point to another using a variety of jumps, somersaults, running, and rolling through a complex, unstructured environment. Okay. That was just one example. I'm sure there are many, many other types of examples. So, is automaticity, we talk about, we learn these skills and abilities, and then we move up to trying to make them automatic. Is automaticity something that we should actually hold up high? So, John Wooden, again, the famous basketball coach in the United States, said the importance of repetition until automaticity cannot be overstated. Norman Vincent Peale emphasized that repetition of the same thought of physical action will develop into habit, which repeated frequently enough becomes an automatic reflex. This is almost when people talk about muscle memory, which if you're around me, please don't say it. Celtics, that's the Boston Celtics, that's basketball. Bill Sharman said, it's a game of habit or repetition, it's a reflex. The game is so quick you don't have time to think. I think he's right in that you don't have time to consciously make decisions about what you want to do, but it's not absolute repetition. So with this traditional view of skills, thinking about or paying attention to what you're doing is a burden that must be lifted. So adaptation is the key. So I have a little video here I'm going to play. This video is available if you want to explore it better. Arrow, I want to go back to the regular arrow. To explore this video on the website that goes along with the book. So you can watch this at your leisure. I'm going to play it. It's about 7 minutes long, and then we're going to dissect a little part of it. So here we go. I want to make sure the sound gets to you as well.
Thousands of hours of practice, which have filled his mind with so many permutations of the game to tap into, that when it comes to match play, he has an uncanny ability to perform without having to think or even look at the ball.
He is effectively a scholar of football. It's the same way as studying any other subject, learning a new language, anything like that. You build up experience, you learn the basic rules of grammar in the different words that are available to you. So in football terms, that's going to be the skills, then putting them into a match situation. And so as you become more fluent in the language, you don't need to think about it as much.
So Ronaldo's vast experience gives him the ability to intuitively read the game under normal conditions. But what if the conditions are very far from normal? Can Ronaldo still hit the back of the net if all the lights are turned off and he's in complete darkness?
Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to have Andy feeding the balls in as if it's a cross, and then sometime in the ball flight, the lights are going to go black, so you won't be able to see anything at all. We're expecting you to be able to put the ball in the goal. That's what we're hoping will happen. We're hoping that you'll have picked up some advanced cues from Andy's body position, the shapes, the positioning of his feet and his hips, and therefore we'll be able to tell exactly where the ball's going to go and get yourself in the right position, even though you can't see it.
Okay.
Taking Ronaldo on in this seemingly impossible test is an amateur footballer called Ronald.
Come and join me, Ronald. Ronaldo. So we've got Ronald in here, same age as you, roughly the same height. We're going to use Ronald as a comparison and see how he reacts doing this same test.
Ronald is going first.
Dark! Light! Light!
So what does the night vision reveal? Ronald misses the ball by quite a way. Perhaps not that surprising. But can Ronaldo do any better?
I hope to do once.
Dark! Light!
Aye, that's one straight in the bag.
The night vision replay shows how differently Ronaldo performs. To confirm that wasn't just luck, another attempt.
Dark! Light!
Love that. Be careful.
And the replay?
How hard is that? It's difficult because it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Because you are focusing the ball, and after non-light, you have to try to memorize the ball.
Human reaction time is about 200 milliseconds, and by 500 milliseconds, Ronaldo's subconscious has interpreted Andy's body language, worked out which direction the ball will go in, calculated its speed and trajectory, and then programmed his body to reach it at the optimum moment.
Love that.
It's almost as if they're doing maths in their head, even though they wouldn't be able to describe it to you. You could see from their performance that Ronaldo saw the first part of the ball flight information. He'd picked up information from Andy kicking the ball and was able to move his body into the correct position. This is because he's processed the information, he has experience of where the ball is likely to go, he's able to analyse all that as it's coming towards him and therefore connect successfully with the ball.
Love that.
Ronald, on the other hand, doesn't have this same level of experience. He would have watched the ball flight. It's likely that he will just have had his eyes on the ball instead of picking up any information from Andy himself. And then when the lights go down and it's black, he's kind of stranded in no man's land a little bit and just has to do his best to react, but is naturally going to struggle with that.
So far, the lights have been shut off when the ball is in midair. But now, the lights will be turned off just at the moment Andy kicks it. Can Ronaldo score with only Andy's body language to go on?
Here you go, we'll get one. We good?
Yeah, good.
Okay, Ronaldo.
Dark. Light.
Light. Aye. Ronaldo, quality. What was that, a shoulder? Back. Great finish, great finish. That was a great finish.
This is great, because I imagine the ball is coming. I scared to go with the face, so I go with half chest, half shoulder, and then put the ball inside.
Quality, great finish. So Zoe, tell me, how difficult is that? I mean, the last one, when we adjusted the time of the lighting.
Yeah, it's so difficult. They've done studies like this using computer simulations, so you watch it on a computer and just have to say where the ball's going, and from them they can see that elite athletes can tell much earlier where the ball's coming from, but to have to actually produce a physical response when a ball is flying at you, then it's really good skills, amazing.
Top man, that's ledge.
All right, I'm going to stop there. You can watch the entire thing if you like on there. But so the traditional view is that by 500 milliseconds, Ronaldo's subconscious has interpreted Andy's body language, worked out what direction the ball's going to go in, calculated his speed. You get it. And it's almost, she says, as if he's doing maths. I love the British approach to that in his head. But the assumption is that this is based on is that the information we pick up through our perceptual systems is somehow insufficient and impoverished. We're not getting enough information. But when he's looking at the player and the flight of the ball, there isn't enough information for him to control his actions successfully. What he's perceiving needs to be interpreted, processed, enriched by the computer. This is the traditional view, okay? But here's another view of what he did. And this comes from Gibson and Gibson, the perceptual team, husband and wife team who did a lot of work, said, well, but there is a lot of direct information to allow you to achieve the goal. And specifically in this situation, there is an angle in this figure. Let's put the laser pointer back on here. That the ball is moving. If the player moves along this angle, keeps it the same, then they have a better chance of interacting with the ball in this thing. So, direct learning. They're not really computing or predicting anything. They're not relying on stored memories of plays they've made in the past. They're just adjusting their movements in response to information from the environment. They're adapting to their environment, establishing this beneficial relationship with it. They're not acquiring something from it that allows them to be disconnected from it. And I think this is really critical. So in this instance, we look at learning is about attending to things, rather than acquiring the knowledge that absolves us of the need to do so, attending to things. If we read books by somebody like Alva, I don't know how you say it, N-O with the 2 dots E, Noy, he had an expanded view of what Skeffington and Goldstein talked about when they used the word centering. Centering, that having the relationship to everything, this large volume of things that are around us. I think that's really important. Adapting to, attending to what's in our environment. So these are some models about direct learning. I'm not going to go into any detail, but I really like the idea of this education of intention, and you calibrate things, and what we do and how we do it. And to move our performance to better overall performances. So, in summary, the control of actions can be explained much more simply, more parsimoniously, as the establishment and adaptation of information movement control laws, in which the performer directly picks up some action-relevant information from the environment and uses it to regulate their actions. There's no need then for prediction or information processing or even accessing memories from previous actions. You're just in the moment. You're with it. Skillful behavior is not rote, repetitive, or automatic. It is adaptive, responsive, and intelligent. We want to develop skills, not just habits. Skillful behavior is intelligent and reactive to changing constraints, both in the short and long term. It involves an element of improvement and is concerned with how, whether, or action is conducive to achieving our goal. And that's really the major thing. So, representativeness. To what extent are athletes using the same information, performing the same types of movements, and looking in the same places in practice as they do in competition? There's always that dictum, you perform like you practice. So we should get more and more practice to be as similar to what they do in competition. And that should raise the level of their performance in competition. Research suggests this issue of representative design is not only critical for learning the skill, but it also may be important for injury prevention. Sometimes you get the person that's like, oh, we have this big thing going to happen, so I'll take it easy in my practice or in the last few games. And then the person actually gets hurt because they weren't fully in the moment. And we see a lot of that in certain things where you play the whole season, you've qualified for the playoffs. Do you play your regular players or not play them in the last one or two games? And sometimes you see key people get hurt because it's almost like they weren't going full speed. So it's very critical. An important example of this is how unplanned and unpredictable movements are incorporated into practice. So getting those kinds of unplanned, unpredictable types of things is important to being adaptable. So he says, as a consultant, one of the comments I find myself making a lot when observing practice activities is, well, that was a nice dance recital. When does the practice start? And I think that's very interesting. So a final thought. Franz Bosch, The Anatomy of Agility. You can find this, and there's more on Dr. Gray's website, is the body has very little interest in what the coach has to say. So being a good vision therapist is not about saying the right thing to the patient or putting it into perfect words. Our patients aren't really listening to those. They can't put that into action. We have to arrange the conditions to allow the person to have the necessary, meaningful experiences to acquire these basic /abilities. So for alternative access to the links, I want you to please go to this https://perceptionaction.com/book. I hope you have found this informative, helpful, and insightful. And I look forward to continuing interaction with you through our course.